Deputy Ethan Cole was a man who'd forgotten how to feel. Years on the job, years after losing everything that once made life full. Then, one quiet night, fate came on four legs. A small, trembling German shepherd puppy appeared out of the dark, crying, pawing, pulling him toward the woods as if begging him to follow. He could have turned away, but something in those eyes, something pure and pleading, wouldn't let him. That decision, that one step into the unknown, would lead him into a story of love, loss, and the kind of loyalty that can only be found between a man and a dog. Sometimes, the rescuer isn't who you think it is. The last light of the sun faded across the horizon, laying its gold across the small southern town of Haven Ridge. The streets were quiet now, just the hum of street lamps flickering to life and the whisper of cicadas warming the dusk. Storefront windows reflected the dying glow like tired eyes. A paper cup rolled lazily across Main Street, nudged by the soft breath of the evening wind. Deputy Ethan Cole drove slow, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the radio that muttered nothing but faint static. The patrol car's headlights washed over familiar streets, old brick buildings, shuttered diners, the faded sign of the barbershop that closed 2 years ago, but never took down its open sign. His coffee sat in the cup holder beside him, long gone cold. He sipped it anyway, out of habit, wincing at the bitter taste. Routine was his companion, and silence his only friend. He'd been on this route for almost a decade. Same streets, same turns, same small-town stillness that pressed against the glass like fog. But tonight, something about the quiet felt heavier. It wasn't the kind of peace that soothed a man. It was the kind that reminded him of what he'd lost. The radio crackled once, then fell quiet again. No calls, no movement. Just him, the empty roads, and the weight of memory that rode shotgun. Ethan exhaled slowly, tapping the steering wheel with 2 fingers. He'd never been a man of many words, not since the night everything changed. People in town said he'd taken to solitude like it was medicine, but they didn't know the truth. They didn't know about the photograph he kept folded in the glove box. A faded image of a woman with laughing eyes and a golden retriever sitting proudly beside her. Anna and Duke, his world once upon a time. A drunk driver had taken both on the same night. That was 6 years ago. The wound had never quite healed. It only learned to hide beneath the badge and the uniform. Every time he passed the bend in the road near the old oak tree, the one marked with a cross someone else had left, his chest still tightened. He never told anyone it was him who replaced the flowers there each month. Now the world he lived in was smaller, quieter. The hum of his cruiser, the soft hiss of the radio, the rhythmic thud of boots on pavement when he stepped out to check a door latch. That was his life. The job kept his hands busy. The silence kept his heart still. He slowed the car at the last intersection, where the old church stood silhouetted against the fading sky. The stained glass windows glowed faintly under the streetlight, colors dulled but still stubbornly beautiful. He'd always admired that. How even broken glass could catch light if you gave it the chance. He parked the cruiser near the town square and stepped out. The air smelled of dust and honeysuckle. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once and then fell silent. He stretched his shoulders, feeling the pull of muscle and years. His boots, worn from long patrols, made soft, steady sounds against the cracked asphalt. The wind shifted. A strand of his hair brushed his temple as he adjusted his hat, squinting at the slow drift of clouds overhead. A storm was brewing far beyond the ridge. He could sense it. The sky was the color of bruised steel, split faintly by threads of lightning that never touched the ground. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the small notepad he carried everywhere, and jotted down a few lines. Routine notes, patrol time, location. But as he wrote, his hand paused. His gaze lingered on the horizon, on the last trace of sunset, bleeding into the dark. This job had once been about protecting others. Now it was mostly about keeping himself from falling apart. He ran a hand over his face, rough with stubble, and chuckled bitterly. "End of shift," he muttered, as though saying it aloud would make it true. He'd drive home, heat up leftovers, and sit on the porch where the silence was thick enough to drown in. That was the plan. That was always the plan. But as he turned to head back toward the cruiser, a sound reached him, so faint he almost missed it. A cry. It wasn't human. It was soft, broken, and distant, like a whimper carried by the wind. Ethan stopped, every instinct tightening. He tilted his head, scanning the street. The sound came again, higher this time, sharper. It was somewhere beyond the last row of houses, near the tree line that bordered the road to the forest. He frowned, hand resting on the butt of his flashlight. The rational part of his mind dismissed it. Probably an animal, maybe a fox or a stray. But another part, quieter yet stronger, urged him to listen. The third time it came, there was no mistaking it. A cry of pain, thin but persistent, echoing through the night. He exhaled through his nose, long and steady, and reached into the cruiser for his flashlight. The beam sliced through the darkness, cutting across the still town. Dust motes glimmered in the light. Everything else was silent. Too silent. "All right," he muttered, clicking the safety strap on his holster out of habit. "Let's see what's going on." He took a few steps toward the sound, the gravel crunching softly under his boots. His breath made small clouds in the cooling air. The scent of rain mixed with pine drifted in from the woods. For a moment, he hesitated at the edge of the street, glancing back toward the car, toward safety, routine, and the numbness he'd spent years building. But then that sound came again, weaker now, but unmistakable. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't imagination. It was a cry for help. Ethan's jaw tightened. His flashlight beam lifted, tracing the black mouth of the forest road ahead. The trees loomed tall, their silhouettes trembling under a distant rumble of thunder. He stood there for a long moment, a man on the edge of two worlds. Behind him, the life he knew, cold coffee, silence, safe detachment. Ahead, the unknown, thick with darkness and something that tugged at the edges of his soul. The faint cry echoed one last time, and that was enough. Ethan took a slow, deliberate step forward. Then another. The beam of his flashlight steadied, carving a narrow path into the night as he crossed the road toward the trees, toward whatever waited in the shadows. Behind him, the town remained still. The empty streets, the humming street lamps, the soft pulse of quiet, all unchanged. But for the first time in years, something inside Ethan Cole began to move. The cry came again, sharper this time, breaking through the whisper of wind and the steady hum of the patrol car's engine. Deputy Ethan Cole froze, one hand resting on the open door. His flashlight beam trembled slightly as he swept it across the road, over ditches and grass glistening with dew. Nothing. Just the shadows of the trees shifting with the breeze. Then came another sound, softer, closer. A whimper that carried the thin, breathy ache of something alive and frightened. Ethan's pulse quickened. He adjusted the beam, the light cutting through a thin layer of mist. "Hello?" he called out, his voice steady but low. "You out there, buddy?" No answer. Only silence. He stepped out of the cruiser fully, boots crunching against gravel, the night air cool against his neck. Somewhere beyond the roadside ditch, just inside the tree line, he heard it again. A small cry, like the broken gasp of a creature too young to understand fear, but old enough to feel it. Ethan's chest tightened. "Come on," he whispered, sweeping the flashlight toward the sound. Then, from the edge of the woods, something small moved. At first, it was just a shadow, trembling, uncertain. Then the beam caught a glint of wet fur, a flicker of brown and black, and two tiny eyes reflecting the light like glass beads. A puppy. No more than a month old. Its paws were too big for its body, its ears drooping like wilted leaves. Mud clung to its fur, caking its legs. It was shaking so hard that its ribs showed with each shallow breath. Ethan crouched slowly, his boots planting firm on the edge of the road. "Hey there," he murmured, lowering his flashlight so he wouldn't blind it. "Easy, little one. You lost?" The puppy stared at him, unblinking. Then, with a sound that was half a sob, half a bark, it took a hesitant step forward. Ethan felt something stir inside him, a strange pull, fragile but insistent. He extended a gloved hand, palm open, speaking softly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." For a moment the night held still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then the puppy stumbled toward him, its small legs wobbling with exhaustion. It stopped just inches away from his boots and lifted its face. The sound it made, a soft, pleading whine, went straight through him. Ethan's throat tightened. He reached out gently, fingers brushing the puppy's fur. It was cold, wet, trembling like a heartbeat he could feel through his fingertips. "Easy now," he whispered. "You're all right. You're safe." But before he could lift it, the puppy jerked away. It turned, gave a sharp, urgent bark, then ran a few steps toward the dark trees. It stopped, looked back at him, barked again, a high, desperate sound, and then waited. Ethan frowned, half standing. "What is it? You want me to follow?" The puppy barked once more, pawing at the dirt. Then it turned toward the woods again, glancing back as if pleading with him to come. Something about that look, that mixture of fear and purpose, sent a ripple through Ethan's chest. He'd seen eyes like that before, not in people but in animals who'd lost something they couldn't replace. He rose fully, wiping his palm against his thigh, the air heavy with anticipation. "You've got somewhere to go, huh?" he muttered. "All right. Show me." The puppy yipped softly, then darted ahead, stopping every few feet to make sure he was still following. Ethan turned back briefly toward his cruiser, its headlights still casting pale arcs across the empty road, and then back to the woods. He hesitated only a second longer before grabbing his flashlight from the hood and stepping off the asphalt. The grass was damp, the soil soft beneath his boots. Branches whispered above him. The puppy's small form flitted between the shadows like a ghost, tail low, movements quick but purposeful. Ethan kept a careful distance, murmuring under his breath as he followed. "You're not making this easy, are you, little one?" Every so often, the pup stopped and looked back, those dark eyes glinting in the flashlight beam, filled with something that felt too knowing for such a young creature. Then it would bark again, the sound breaking the silence like a fragile thread pulling him deeper. As they moved farther from the road, the night grew thicker. The smell of damp earth rose stronger. His radio hissed faintly with static, then went dead. He clicked the side of it, tried again. Nothing. The woods swallowed all sound except the occasional cry of an owl and the rustle of unseen things. Ethan paused, catching his breath. "All right, Cole," he muttered, half to himself. "You're following a stray puppy into the woods at night. Brilliant. But something deep in his gut told him this was no ordinary stray. The little dog didn't move like one lost. It moved with intent, like it was leading. The flashlight beam flickered once, catching the pup's fur as it glanced back at him again. That same pleading look, sharp and insistent. He sighed, shaking his head. All right, I'm coming. When he took another step forward, the puppy let out a soft cry. This one different. Not scared. Urging. It pawed at the ground, then turned and slipped farther into the woods. Ethan followed slowly, his boots crunching against leaves. Each step seemed to echo louder than the last, until even his own breathing sounded intrusive. The deeper he went, the more he felt something shift, a heaviness pressing in, like the forest itself was holding its breath. The puppy stopped again, just ahead, its small body illuminated in a pool of pale light. It turned, stared straight at him, and whimpered once, a sound so full of exhaustion and trust it made his heart ache. Ethan crouched again, this time closer. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" he whispered. His voice cracked. He reached out a second time, slower now, and this time the puppy didn't run. It let him touch it, his hand trembling slightly as he gathered it gently against his chest. The small creature pressed its face into his jacket, shivering. For a brief moment, he felt its heartbeat, fragile, rapid, alive. "There we go," he murmured, rubbing its back. "Got you now." He stood, holding it close. The pup whined once, then, startling him, wriggled free, landing clumsily on the ground. Before he could react, it ran a few steps ahead, barking toward the darkness of the trees. Ethan's brow furrowed. "You're not done yet, huh?" The puppy barked again, louder, insistent, and then waited, eyes fixed on him like a question he couldn't ignore. A man who'd spent years shutting out the world suddenly found himself being pulled toward it again, by something barely the size of his boots. He adjusted his grip on the flashlight, took one long, steady breath, and aimed the beam into the black mouth of the forest. Beyond the light, the woods waited, vast, silent, unknowable. And yet, as the puppy barked once more and began to move forward, Ethan found himself following without hesitation. The beam of his flashlight cut through the mist, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sudden, unfamiliar pulse of hope. The night swallowed them both as they stepped beneath the trees. And with that step, Ethan Cole's quiet life ended, and something extraordinary began. The first step into the forest felt like crossing into another world. The asphalt road vanished behind him, swallowed by a wall of mist and moonlight. The air was colder here, sharp and metallic, tinged with the smell of wet leaves and earth. Fog curled around Ethan, Cole's boots like ghostly fingers, wrapping his legs in quiet warning. His flashlight beam stretched forward in a narrow cone, slicing through the dark like a blade. Somewhere ahead, the puppy's faint whimper echoed, small, desperate, and determined. Ethan adjusted the beam, sweeping it over tree trunks slick with moisture. The forest seemed endless. Every sound carried too far. The groan of branches, the drip of condensation, the crunch of his own steps magnified beneath his boots. He could hear his own heartbeat thudding against the quiet, a rhythm too loud for a place so still. He raised his radio. "Dispatch, this is Cole," he murmured. "Possible stray, near Route 19 Woods. Investigating noise. Over." Static crackled, then nothing. He tried again. "Dispatch, you copy?" Silence. The signal was gone. Ethan frowned, giving the device a sharp tap. More static, then a hiss like the forest exhaling. The radio was useless now. The trees too dense, the air too thick. He slipped it back onto his belt, scanning the path ahead. The only sound left was the soft, fading cry of the little dog. "Guess it's just you and me, kid," he muttered. He moved forward slowly, boots sinking into soft earth. Each step was measured, deliberate, a balance between caution and instinct. His flashlight trembled slightly, its glow illuminating swirls of mist that clung to the ground. The deeper he went, the more the light seemed to shrink, devoured by the darkness around him. The forest was alive, not in the comforting way of rustling leaves and crickets, but in a way that felt watchful. Every shadow had shape. Every gust of wind seemed to carry a whisper that wasn't quite wind at all. Ethan's breath came slower now, fogging in the cold air. He could feel the pulse of adrenaline under his skin. Steady, alert, but tinged with something else. Unease. He paused, crouching slightly as the puppy's whimper came again. Closer now. He could almost sense it moving ahead, darting between the undergrowth. He lifted his flashlight, catching a glimpse of small paw prints in the mud. Light impressions, barely visible under the scattered leaves. "All right," he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm right behind you." A twig snapped to his left. Ethan froze, flashlight swinging in the direction of the sound. Nothing but shadows and mist. The trees stood silent, their branches skeletal against the faint moonlight. He scanned the ground. No movement. No sign of the pup. Just the hollow sound of his own breathing. Then another noise, faint, dragging, like something shifting deeper in the brush. He tensed, hand instinctively brushing against his holster. He didn't draw, not yet. Old instincts told him to stay calm, stay measured. But this was no ordinary call, no usual patrol. The forest didn't feel empty. It felt aware. The fog thickened as he pressed on. His flashlight flickered once, sputtered, then steadied again. He cursed softly under his breath. "What am I doing?" he muttered. "Chasing a stray puppy through the woods in the middle of the night." His words fell flat, devoured by the damp air. Yet even as he said it, a part of him knew it wasn't just about a stray anymore. There was something in that cry, something pleading, something he couldn't ignore. He took another step, then another. The puppy cried out again, higher this time, a sound that cut straight through the dark, slicing the tension in his chest. Ethan quickened his pace, ducking under low branches that clawed at his sleeves. The forest floor sloped downward, uneven and slick with mud. He nearly lost his footing once, catching himself against a tree trunk slick with moss. "Easy," he whispered, both to himself and to whatever fragile life was waiting out there. The air grew colder still. He could see his breath now, white clouds billowing in front of his face. The trees pressed closer, their roots twisting through the soil like veins. His flashlight swept across fallen logs, tangled roots, and the remnants of an old hunting trail that had long been forgotten. Each cry from the puppy grew fainter, not farther, but weaker. That realization twisted in his gut like a knife. "Hold on, little one," he said, his voice tight. "I'm coming." He followed the sound through a patch of undergrowth, pushing aside branches that whipped against his face. Leaves brushed against his cheeks, damp and cold. The beam of his flashlight wavered over patches of fog that shimmered faintly in the light, like ghosts moving between the trees. He stopped again, panting lightly, listening. The forest had gone eerily still. No wind, no birds, no movement. Then, a faint bark. Not frightened this time, but insistent, urging. Ethan turned toward it immediately, pushing forward through the thicket. Twigs snapped beneath his boots, Branches snagged his jacket. His pulse was racing now. The beam of light caught the faint shimmer of two eyes watching him from ahead. The puppy, standing at the base of a fallen tree, looking back at him. "There you are," he exhaled, relief flooding his voice. But the puppy didn't come running this time. It barked once, short and sharp, then turned and darted deeper into the woods. "Hey!" Ethan called, moving after it. "Wait!" The little dog vanished again, its cry echoing ahead. Ethan followed the sound, ducking beneath branches, sidestepping roots. The forest seemed to twist around him, reshaping itself with every step. He paused only when his flashlight flickered again. The beam dimmed, then steadied weakly. He tapped it against his palm, muttering a curse. The darkness around him pressed closer now, the kind that felt almost physical, breathing against the edge of his light. He could feel his pulse in his throat. His instincts screamed for him to turn back, to go find help, to wait for daylight. But then he heard it again, that cry. Not just a sound now, but a plea. It carried through the fog like a voice calling from the past, raw, aching, familiar. He closed his eyes for half a second, and somewhere deep within him, a memory stirred. The sound of his old K9 partner, Duke, barking from behind smoke during that last fire. The one he couldn't reach in time. That helplessness, that sound. Ethan's jaw clenched. He opened his eyes, stepped forward, and whispered into the dark. "Not again." He pushed deeper into the trees, each step heavier but more certain. The cries led him on, faint, echoing, almost rhythmic now. The forest swallowed his figure as his flashlight beam flickered one last time before steadying again. The fog rose around him, swallowing his legs, muffling his breath. Yet in the distance, the puppy's voice rang again, fragile but unbroken. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, Ethan followed without hesitation, into the mist, into the dark, and deeper into the part of himself he'd buried long ago. The forest seemed endless. Time had stopped meaning anything. Only the rhythm of his boots against the damp ground kept Ethan moving. His breath came in quiet clouds, vanishing into the mist. Every few steps he lifted his flashlight higher, sweeping its trembling beam across tangled brush and twisted roots. Then, somewhere ahead, a sound broke through the silence. Not the high-pitched cry of the puppy this time. Something deeper, older, ragged. A rasping whine drawn from the lungs of a creature on the edge of its strength. Ethan froze. His pulse quickened, each beat echoing in his ears. He turned slowly, narrowing his eyes, trying to pinpoint the direction. The sound came again, so faint he might have imagined it, yet heavy with pain. "Hello?" he called softly, stepping forward. "Is someone out here?" The only answer was another breathless moan. He pushed through the underbrush, flashlight darting from tree to tree. His boots sank into mud, his jacket snagging on low branches. The fog clung to his legs like something alive. The puppy's soft bark echoed ahead, urgent, guiding, desperate. "All right, little one," Ethan murmured. "I'm right behind you." The whimper grew louder as he followed the pup down a slope where the ground turned uneven and slick. He could feel the forest close in, the air heavy with rot and rain. The beam of his flashlight caught something unnatural against the brown of the earth. A mound of fallen branches. Fresh, jagged, tangled together in chaos, as if nature itself had collapsed there in panic. The puppy darted straight toward it, yipping frantically. It clawed at the wood, small paws scraping bark and dirt. Ethan's breath hitched as he aimed his light lower. Beneath the branches, something moved. At first he thought it was just the flicker of shadow. Then he saw it. A patch of matted fur, the slow, trembling rise and fall of a ribcage too thin to belong to anything healthy. His light steadied, and the shape took form. A German shepherd, full-grown, female, her coat dull and filthy, patches missing where skin showed through. Her body was half buried under the fallen debris, one hind leg twisted awkwardly beneath a thick branch. Her breath rattled weakly, each exhale sounding like it cost her a piece of her soul. Ethan dropped to one knee, his flashlight shaking in his grip. "Oh, God," he whispered. The puppy whined louder, pressing itself against the trapped dog's face, licking frantically at her muzzle, pawing at the dirt. The mother responded with the faintest tilt of her head, her nose brushing weakly against the pup's fur. A low, broken whimper escaped her throat. That sound, it wasn't just pain. It was relief. Ethan felt something twist hard in his chest. He set the flashlight on the ground, letting its beam wash over them both. The sight was unbearable and sacred all at once. A reunion played out in trembling breaths and silent devotion. He reached forward slowly, voice low and trembling. "Hey. Hey there, girl. You hang on now. You're not alone anymore." The mother's eyes opened halfway. Glassy amber, clouded with exhaustion, but full of something unmistakable. Trust. She didn't flinch when his hand hovered near her paw. She just watched him, steady, waiting. The puppy nestled closer to her chest, still licking, still crying, as if trying to remind her to breathe. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat burning. He brushed away smaller branches from her side, his fingers cold and shaking. Beneath the dirt and debris he saw how emaciated she was, ribs like iron bars under skin, her frame frail as paper. She'd been there for days, maybe longer, starving and pinned, with only her will keeping her alive. And somehow, she had sent her baby out to find help. The thought hit him like a physical blow. He sat back on his heels, the damp earth soaking through his knees, and pressed a trembling hand to his face. His chest felt tight, his eyes hot. You brought me here, didn't you?" he whispered, looking at the pup. The little dog barked once, a sharp, desperate sound, as if answering him. Ethan turned back to the mother. Her breathing was shallow now, ragged edges of air catching in her throat. She blinked slowly, the effort visible, then let her gaze shift, first to the pup, then to him. That look pierced him deeper than any cry could. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even pain. It was something purer, an exhausted plea for mercy, for help, for her child. Ethan reached out, brushing the back of her paw with his fingertips. "You did good, Mama," he whispered. "You did so good." His voice cracked on the words. The dog's paw twitched faintly beneath his hand, as if in acknowledgement. The puppy whimpered again, curling up against her neck, refusing to move. Ethan's breath shuddered in his chest. He'd seen death before. Too much of it. But this was different. This wasn't senseless violence or cruelty. This was sacrifice, the kind that only love could demand. He pressed his palm flat against the mother's side, feeling the weak rise and fall of her chest. "Stay with me," he murmured. "You've come too far to quit now." Her ear flicked once in response, a small, fragile motion that broke him completely. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, low and long. The forest rustled softly, as if the world itself was leaning in to listen. Ethan wiped the rain and sweat from his brow, the flashlight's beam trembling as he tried to assess the branches pinning her down. Some were thick, too thick for him to move alone, but he couldn't walk away. Not after seeing this. The pup barked again, circling the spot, tail low, eyes pleading. Ethan reached for his radio instinctively. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Cole, I've got an injured dog, adult female near Forest Creek, pinned under debris, requesting rescue. Static. He adjusted the dial, trying again. Dispatch, do you copy? Only the hiss of interference answered him. He looked back down at the dog, who now lay still except for the faint rhythm of her breathing. He placed a hand over her paw again, grounding himself. It's all right, he said softly. I'll get you out. I promise. His flashlight beam trembled across her face. Despite the mud, the exhaustion, and the dirt tangled in her fur, she was beautiful. A creature built for strength, brought to ruin by fate but still refusing to let go. The puppy pressed its face against her neck, its tiny body shaking with quiet sobs. Ethan exhaled slowly, the fog of his breath mingling with the mist around them. He couldn't stop the tears anymore. They spilled freely down his cheeks, hot against the cold air. God, he whispered again, voice breaking. You did good, Mama. You did so good. The words fell heavy in the night, carried softly by the wind. For a long moment, nothing moved but the gentle flicker of his flashlight beam over the fallen branches, the fragile, flickering proof of life that refused to go out. And there, in the silent heart of the forest, Ethan Cole understood what he'd stumbled into. Not a routine patrol, not coincidence. A miracle, born of love, desperation, and the unyielding bond between a mother and her child. The first tear fell from his chin and hit the dirt. That was the moment everything changed. The forest was still but heavy, as if holding its breath along with him. Deputy Ethan Cole crouched beside the fallen German shepherd, one hand gripping his radio so tightly the metal dug into his palm. The mother's chest rose in shallow, broken waves. Her breath rattled faintly, each exhale weaker than the one before. The puppy pressed itself against her side, letting out a low, pitiful cry that tore straight through him. Ethan lifted the radio closer to his mouth. Dispatch, this is Deputy Cole, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I've got an injured animal, adult female, trapped under debris near Forest Creek. She's critical. Request immediate rescue. Static hissed for a heartbeat. Then a voice cracked through, distorted by distance. Copy that, Deputy. Animal rescue's been notified. ETA. Approximately 2 hours. 2 hours. Ethan froze, staring down at the dog's frail body. The words echoed in his head like a sentence. 2 hours of waiting. 2 hours she didn't have. He swallowed hard. Negative, he said into the radio, urgency sharpening his tone. She's not going to make it that long. A pause. Then the dispatcher again. All available units are tied up, Cole. You'll have to hold position until... He switched the radio off before she could finish. The silence that followed was deafening. The beam of his flashlight flickered weakly beside him, its light trembling across the mother dog's body. Her ribs rose once, barely, then fell again. Her breathing had turned to shallow shivers of effort, her head lolling slightly against the damp earth. The puppy whimpered louder, pawing at her muzzle as if begging her not to fade. Ethan's jaw clenched. The sound of his own heartbeat filled his ears, a dull roar that drowned out everything else. He stared at the broken creature before him, the way her chest strained, the faint tremor in her paw, the slow blink of eyes that refused to close, and felt something ignite deep in his gut. He'd seen death before, too many times. Accidents, shootings, wrecks on lonely roads. He'd learned to live with it, to tell himself that sometimes you just can't save them all. But this wasn't one of those times. Not tonight. He reached down and laid a trembling hand against her side. Her fur was damp and cold beneath his palm. Stay with me, he whispered, though he wasn't sure if it was for her or for himself. The flashlight flickered again, then steadied, throwing long shadows across the clearing. The puppy cried harder, circling them both, tail low, eyes wide and shining. Ethan exhaled slowly. His breath came out shaky, his throat tight. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, rubbing a hand over his face. He was supposed to wait. Protocol said to stay put, to avoid making things worse. But what did Protocol know about watching something die when it had already fought so hard to live? He looked down again. The dog's sides barely moved now. Her breathing was ragged, erratic, her eyes glassy but still aware. She wasn't giving up. She was fighting, but she was losing. Ethan's pulse thundered. His decision formed before he could stop it. He stripped off his jacket and folded it, sliding it gently under her head to lift her from the cold mud. "You held on this long," he whispered. "I'm not letting you go now." The puppy pressed against his arm, crying, its small body shaking. Ethan glanced down at it and gave a weak smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're not waiting," he said softly. "You hear me? We're not waiting." He planted both hands against the thickest branch pinning her chest. The wood was slick and heavy, half buried into the ground. He could see how its weight pressed against her ribs, each shallow breath a battle. "All right," he murmured through gritted teeth. "Let's get you out." He braced his boots into the soil, bent his knees, and pushed. The branch didn't budge. Pain flared across his shoulders. He grunted, sweat mixing with the dirt on his face. He adjusted his stance, digging deeper, pushing again. The wood groaned faintly, but held fast. "Come on," he growled, voice cracking. "Come on!" His muscles screamed. His arms trembled violently. He could feel the slick bark slipping beneath his grip. He tried again, teeth clenched, breath ragged, straining every inch of his body against the weight. The branch shifted a fraction, then stopped. He stumbled back, gasping, sweat dripping from his forehead. The pup whimpered beside him, pawing at the ground where he'd been pushing. Ethan stared at the unmoving branch, frustration and fear burning behind his ribs. For a moment, he thought about stopping, calling again, waiting. But then he heard it. A faint, choked sound from the mother's throat. Not a whine, not a cry. A gasp. She was suffocating under the weight. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. He dropped to his knees again, hands trembling as he reached for the branch. "No," he whispered. "Not like this. You've come too far for this." He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead briefly against the rough bark. For a moment, the darkness behind his eyelids wasn't the forest anymore. It was another night, years ago. The smell of smoke, the sound of sirens. His K9 partner, Duke, barking somewhere beyond the flames, trapped. He could still hear himself screaming Duke's name. Could still feel the helplessness clawing through him when the roof caved in and the barking stopped. He'd sworn that night he would never freeze again. Ethan opened his eyes, the memory burning through the fog like lightning. "Not again," he breathed. He shifted his grip, wedging his shoulder under the branch. "You held on for your pup," he said, voice rough. "I can damn sure hold on for you." He pushed. Harder this time. Pain ripped through his arms and back, but he didn't stop. He could feel the bark biting into his palms, the strain of every muscle screaming for relief. The wood groaned again, louder now, a deep, creaking protest that echoed through the clearing. The puppy barked beside him, tiny and fierce, as if urging him on. Ethan's teeth clenched. "Come on!" he roared, shoving with everything he had left. His vision blurred, his boots slipped in the mud, but the branch moved, an inch, then two, then just enough to free her ribs from the crushing weight. He stumbled forward onto his knees, panting, his breath ragged. The dog's body shifted slightly beneath the freed space, her chest rising with a long, rattling inhale. She was breathing again. Weak, shallow, but breathing. Ethan slumped beside her, covered in mud and sweat, his heart hammering. He reached for her paw again, voice shaking. "That's it, girl," he whispered. "You're okay now. You're okay." The puppy pressed itself against the mother's neck, licking her face in trembling relief. Ethan leaned back on his heels, chest heaving, the cool air biting at his skin. The forest around him had gone quiet again, but this time the silence didn't feel empty. It felt sacred. He looked up toward the canopy, whispering hoarsely, "I got her, Duke. I got her this time." And beneath the cold, whispering trees, a man who'd spent years living with ghosts finally began to let one go. The sound of splintering wood cracked through the forest like thunder. The branch finally gave way, tumbling aside with a heavy thud. For a heartbeat, silence followed. Then a single, ragged gasp filled the air. The mother German shepherd's chest lifted sharply, her eyes fluttering open. Ethan froze in place, breath caught in his throat. The flashlight beam quivered in his trembling hand, its light blurring behind a film of tears he didn't bother to wipe away. "Easy, girl," he whispered, voice breaking. "You're all right. You're all right." The mother dog's sides heaved in uneven rhythm, the fragile sound of survival struggling against the weight of exhaustion. The puppy let out a sharp bark and pressed its tiny face against her muzzle, licking frantically, whining between gasps as if begging her to stay awake. Ethan's throat tightened until he could barely breathe. The light caught the glimmer of her eyes, dull, glassy, but still alive, and for one suspended moment, he saw something ancient in them. The stubborn refusal to give up, even when everything else had already fallen away. He swallowed hard, leaning closer, his voice low and fierce. "You're not dying here," he said through clenched teeth. "Not tonight." His pulse hammered against his ribs. Every muscle in his body trembled from effort and adrenaline. He could still feel the ghost of the weight that had pinned her, the memory of it pressing against his shoulders like a curse. But now there was only one thing that mattered: getting her out. Ethan slipped his arms beneath her, one under her chest, one under her hind legs. The moment he lifted, he nearly gasped. She was weightless, skin and bone, warm but far too light. Her head lolled against his arm, her breath shallow and uneven. Her fur was coarse, damp, streaked with dirt and dried blood. Yet beneath all of it, he could feel the faint pulse of life still beating against his wrist. Weak, but there. "Good girl," he murmured, holding her closer. "Stay with me." The puppy barked again, circling his boots, tail whipping like a frantic flat. Ethan looked down at it and nodded, half smiling through his tears. "All right, partner. Lead the way." The little dog didn't hesitate. It turned toward the direction they had come from, toward the faint glow of the distant road, and began trotting ahead, stopping every few feet to look back. Ethan followed, his boots sinking into the mud. The forest floor was uneven, roots clawing at his ankles, branches tearing at his sleeves. His breath came in heavy bursts, echoing between the trees. Every step felt heavier than the last, yet the body in his arms seemed to grow lighter, as if some part of her had already left, floating just beyond reach. "No," he whispered under his breath. "Not yet. You've got someone waiting." Rain began to fall, thin, cold drops that pattered softly through the canopy. The air turned sharp and metallic, the scent of wet pine filling his lungs. He stumbled once, catching himself against a tree, his boots sliding in the muck. The mother dog whimpered faintly, her breath faltering. He said quickly, adjusting his hold, "You're okay. I've got you." The puppy barked from ahead, its voice cutting through the rain like a small, bright flare of hope. Ethan took another step, then another. The world narrowed to the sound of his heartbeat and the weight in his arms. The flashlight beam swung wildly with his movement, carving fleeting shapes into the dark. Branches like reaching hands, mist swirling like smoke. Every few paces, he'd look down at her. The faint rise and fall of her chest, the twitch of her ear at his voice. She was fighting still. That was enough. Ethan's mind flickered back to the radio, to the dispatcher's voice echoing in his memory. ETA 2 hours. He could almost hear himself answering now, his voice raw and hoarse. "We don't have 2 hours." A branch cracked above him, startling him for a moment. He ducked instinctively, clutching her tighter. "Easy," he whispered again, half to her, half to himself. "You've made it this far. Don't quit on me now." The puppy's cries grew more distant, muffled by the steady hiss of rain. Ethan followed the sound, his body screaming with fatigue. His uniform clung to him, soaked and heavy, his arms aching with the effort of holding her steady. Still, he didn't stop. When his legs threatened to give way, he looked down at the small, trembling pup waiting ahead, tail wagging weakly, eyes shining with a loyalty so fierce it burned. That tiny creature had refused to give up on her. How could he? He pushed forward again, gritting his teeth, every breath turning into a silent prayer. Just a little further. Please. Just a little further. The trees began to thin. The distant glow of the road shimmered through the fog like a faint promise. His pulse quickened. Almost there. But just as the clearing came into view, Ethan stumbled again. His boot caught on a root, and for a terrifying second, the world tilted. He clutched, her tighter, forcing his balance, falling to one knee with a grunt. The impact jarred through him, sending pain shooting up his leg. He gasped, sucking in air that burned his lungs. The mother dog whimpered faintly, her paw twitching against his arm. "Hey," he rasped, blinking away the sting of rain and tears. "Hey, don't give up. You hear me? You're coming home." The puppy pressed against his knee, pawing at him, whining softly. It was soaked through now, fur slicked to its tiny body, but its spirit hadn't dimmed. Ethan smiled weakly down at it. "You're one stubborn little thing," he murmured. "Guess that makes 2 of us." He forced himself up again, cradling the mother close. The road was only a few dozen yards away now. He could see the faint silver gleam of his patrol car through the veil of mist. The sound of thunder rolled again, low and distant, as if the sky itself was holding its breath for them. Ethan trudged forward, his boots sloshing through puddles, his breath coming in hoarse gasps. The mother's breathing was shallow, but steady now. Her weight warm against his chest. Each step became a vow, each breath a promise. "You're not dying here," he whispered again. "Not in this place. Not after what you've done." And with the puppy darting ahead, leading them through the dark like a lantern made of hope, Ethan crossed the final stretch of woods. The moment his boots hit gravel, he almost fell. His knees buckled, but he caught himself, clutching the dog tighter. Her heartbeat faint, but there. The road shimmered under the rainfall. His patrol car waited in the distance, its reflective markings glinting like salvation. He looked down once more at the mother and whispered, voice shaking, "We made it, girl. You held on." The puppy barked, tail wagging weakly, pressing its small body against his boot. Ethan lowered his head for a moment, eyes closed, his chest rising with a heavy, tear-filled sigh. Then he stepped forward again, into the rain, into the faint glow of his headlights, carrying her as though he were carrying the last fragile piece of faith he had left. And in that moment, under the watchful trees and the crying sky, Deputy Ethan Cole chose love over law and found the part of himself he thought he'd buried forever. The night pressed against Ethan Cole like a living thing. The air was heavier now, thick with rain and the scent of pine sap and wet earth. He could feel the tremor of exhaustion settling into his bones, each breath sharp and uneven. In his arms, the mother German shepherd was slipping again, her breathing shallow, her weight sagging as if the strength holding her to this world was loosening. Hey, no, Ethan rasped, clutching her tighter. Stay with me. You hear me? Stay. Her head lolled weakly against his forearm, a low whimper escaping her throat. The sound tore through him. The puppy's cries echoed nearby, sharp and panicked, cutting through the damp silence. It darted ahead, then circled back, its paws splashing through puddles. Every few seconds it barked, frantic, pleading, as though it understood time was running out. Ethan stumbled forward, boots slipping on the muddy ground. Branches slapped against his shoulders, rain dripping down his face. Every sound faded now. The whisper of the forest, the moan of the wind, even the storm, all swallowed by the pounding of his heartbeat in his ears. He could feel her warmth fading. Not yet, he muttered through gritted teeth. His throat burned, his voice raw. Not tonight, girl. Not after all this. His foot caught on a root, and he went down hard onto one knee. Pain shot through his leg as the world tilted. The dog's body shifted in his arms, limp, fragile. No. He gasped, tightening his hold. Mud splashed up his sleeves as he steadied her head. The pup let out a high, broken cry, circling them wildly. Ethan's breath came fast, ragged. The cold bit deep, but sweat dripped down his temples, stinging his eyes. His arms shook from the strain. He looked down at her face, the faint flutter of her eyelids, the slow, painful rise and fall of her ribs, and his chest clenched. He pressed his forehead against hers. You've made it this far, he whispered hoarsely. Don't you quit on me now. Not here. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the rain pattering against leaves. Then, a soft exhale from her chest. Faint, but there, still breathing. Ethan pushed himself back to his feet, forcing his body to move. Every step sent a shock of pain through his muscles, but he didn't stop. The puppy trotted ahead again, yipping desperately, looking back every few seconds to make sure he was still behind. The trees loomed around him, tall and endless, their branches bending under the weight of the storm. But above them, the moon broke through, pale and cold, spilling faint silver light through the canopy. That glow became his compass. Ethan lifted his head, breathing hard. The light flickered on the wet ground ahead, catching the faint shimmer of something metallic. He blinked through the blur of rain and tears. The road. It was close. He could almost smell the faint trace of oil and asphalt through the forest's damp breath. His heart surged. Almost there, he muttered, voice cracking. We're almost home. He tightened his grip on the mother dog and kept moving. His boots sank deeper into mud, pulling at him like hands trying to drag him back. But he pushed on, every breath a small war against fatigue. He didn't think anymore. He only moved. The forest blurred into a tunnel of light and shadow, his body running on instinct. The puppy's cries grew louder, echoing through the trees. Somewhere behind him, thunder cracked again, a sound that rolled across the night like a warning. Ethan's arms burned. His back screamed. His vision swam with exhaustion. He stumbled, once, twice, almost falling again. But the thought of setting her down terrified him more than the pain. She was growing colder. He could feel it, and it made something inside him fracture. "You're not leaving me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Not after what you did for that little one. You held on for her. Now you hold on for me." The forest began to thin. The trees opened into a clearing, the mist parting like a curtain. Moonlight poured down onto slick grass, silvering the wet earth. And there, glinting faintly under the pale light, the patrol truck. Ethan's knees nearly buckled with relief. "There you are," he breathed. "There you are." The puppy barked wildly, tail whipping, sprinting toward the vehicle. Ethan followed, half stumbling, half running. His boots pounded against the ground, the sound heavy and uneven. By the time he reached the clearing, he was trembling, not from the cold, but from sheer exhaustion. His arms were numb, his body felt hollowed out. He reached the truck, braced his knee against the bumper, and lowered her gently onto the wet grass. Her sides barely moved now. The flashlight beam, still clutched in his shaking hand, trembled across her body. She was fading again. Ethan's chest heaved. "No!" he said sharply, almost pleading. He set the light down and pressed his palm to her chest. Faint warmth. Faint life. The puppy climbed up beside her, pressing its body close against hers, tiny nose buried in her fur. It whimpered softly, tail still wagging weakly, as if trying to coax her back. Ethan reached for his jacket, the one he'd used earlier as a cushion, and spread it over her to keep her warm. His vision blurred again as he leaned closer. "You did good, girl," he whispered, tears breaking loose now, hot against the cold night. "You're almost there. You hear me? Almost." He turned, pulling open the truck's back door with a sharp click. The sound echoed like salvation. He gathered her carefully, lifting her one last time. Her head lolled against his arm, but a faint sigh escaped her, the smallest sign she still heard him. "Hold on," he murmured, voice trembling. "We're going home." He laid her gently on the back seat, tucking the jacket around her. The puppy scrambled up beside her, refusing to leave her side. It pressed its little body against her ribs, whining softly, as if guarding her from the world. Ethan stood there for a moment, one hand braced against the doorframe, his chest rising and falling in slow, uneven breaths. The light from the moon spilled across the truck's hood, washing the clearing in silver. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, each drop falling like a whisper on the metal roof. For the first time that night, he let his tears fall freely. They came without warning, silent, heavy, unstoppable. Years of grief and guilt bled out of him in quiet sobs as he leaned against the door, staring at the mother dog's still body and the pup's unwavering devotion. He covered his face with a trembling hand. "Not tonight," he whispered again, his voice breaking. "Not tonight." When he finally lowered his hand, the moonlight caught the wet sheen of tears on his face. He reached into his pocket for the keys, the sound of metal faint in the heavy stillness. Behind him, the puppy let out a soft cry, not of fear, but of faith. Ethan looked back once more at them both, the fragile mother and her fierce little guardian, and something deep within him settled into certainty. He was going to save them, whatever it took. The night split open with the sound of sirens. Red and blue lights sliced through the rain-soaked dark as Deputy Ethan Cole's patrol truck tore down the empty road. The tires screamed against the asphalt, kicking up mist that shimmered in the glow of the headlights. Inside, the air was thick with tension, a breathless kind of silence between the screams of the siren. Ethan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The dashboard lights flickered across his face, carving out lines of anguish, fear, and fierce determination. His breath came fast and uneven, fogging the windshield in shallow bursts. Every second felt stolen. From the back seat came the soft, desperate whine of the puppy. Ethan risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The sight tore him apart. The mother German shepherd lay sprawled across his jacket, her fur matted and dark with rain. Her chest rose and fell in fragile, uneven rhythm. Beside her, the pup stood with its tiny paws pressed against her side, licking her muzzle, crying softly. Its body trembled with every bump in the road, but it refused to move from her. "Stay with me, girl," Ethan murmured under his breath, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Just a little longer, please." The words came out like a prayer, low and breaking. Rain lashed against the windshield, streaking the glass in endless lines. The wipers fought to keep up, squealing against the storm. Streetlights blurred past, each one flickering like a heartbeat fading in and out. Ethan's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The speedometer needle climbed. He didn't care. Somewhere deep inside, he could still hear the dispatcher's voice repeating in his memory. "ETA 2 hours. It echoed against the pounding of the siren. He'd refused to wait then, and he wasn't about to lose now. He reached up and flicked the radio on. "This is Deputy Cole," he barked, his voice strained. "I'm en route to Northfield Animal Clinic. I've got a critical, adult female shepherd, severe trauma, unresponsive. Notify them I'm coming in hot." Static crackled for a moment, then a faint reply. "Copy that, Deputy. They'll be ready." Ethan exhaled sharply, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "Hold on," he whispered again, gripping the wheel. "You've fought this long. Don't you dare give up now." The puppy whimpered again. He caught its subconscious reflection in the mirror. Its ears folded, eyes wide and wet, its nose pressed into its mother's fur. The sight gutted him. "It's okay, little one," he said softly. "She's still here. She's still with us." But even as he said it, the dog's chest barely moved. The rise and fall had slowed. Just faint tremors now. "Come on," Ethan growled, pressing harder on the gas. "Don't you quit on me." The truck roared through the open stretch of highway. Thunder rumbled low over the distant hills, a warning that the storm was far from over. The road twisted through darkness, the forest on either side flashing by like silent ghosts. Inside the cab, the siren's wail filled every corner, blending with the puppy's cries and the rasp of Ethan's breathing. It was chaos, but beneath it, something steady pulsed. Determination, hope, a promise made to a dying mother that he refused to break. He turned the corner too fast. The truck fishtailed for a second, tires skidding across wet pavement. Ethan's hands tightened instinctively, correcting, regaining control. His heart slammed against his ribs. He couldn't afford mistakes now. Rain beat harder against the roof, drowning out the siren's echo for a moment. The pup let out a sharp bark, a tiny, desperate sound that made Ethan glance back again. The mother hadn't moved. "Come on!" he shouted, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. "Don't you go quiet on me, you hear? Not after everything you've done." His voice broke, the words choked by the emotion he'd been holding back all night. "You saved her. You brought me here. You don't get to stop now." The road ahead blurred. He blinked hard, realizing tears had filled his eyes again, streaking hot against his cold skin. He didn't bother wiping them away. Up ahead, a light. The clinic. It appeared like a beacon in the dark, glowing red and white through the sheets of rain. The sign flickered against the storm. Northfield Animal Emergency. Ethan's pulse leapt. He reached for the radio again, his voice hoarse. "This is Cole. I'm here. I'm pulling in now." He turned sharply into the gravel lot, the tires skidding, water spraying up in wide arcs. The truck jolted to a stop, sirens still screaming into the night. Before the engine even stilled, Ethan threw open the door. Rain hit him in a cold rush. He ran to the back, yanking open the rear door with shaking hands. "Easy," he whispered, sliding his arms beneath the limp body. The shepherd's fur was cold now, slick with rain and mud, but still faintly warm against his chest. "Come on, girl, stay with me." The puppy tried to climb after him, crying frantically. Ethan scooped it up too, tucking it against his chest beside its mother. The little body shook violently in his palm. The clinic doors burst open. A flood of light spilled across the lot, blinding after the darkness. Figures rushed forward, nurses, a vet in fog, scrubs, gloves snapping into place. Ethan stumbled toward them, his boots slipping on the wet pavement. His breath came in ragged gasps. "She's not breathing right!" he shouted, his voice cracking. She's fading." "Inside!" one of them called, pushing the door open wider. Ethan crossed the threshold, the sirens still wailing outside. The world seemed to narrow to that single moment, his arms around the lifeless dog, the warmth of the pup pressed to his chest, the blinding lights above him. He could feel her heart fluttering weakly against his arm, one last fragile rhythm struggling to keep time. He turned to the vet, eyes red, voice shaking. "Please," he gasped, the word barely holding together. "Don't let her go." The vet nodded quickly. "We've got her." Hands reached for the shepherd, lifting her onto a waiting gurney. The pup cried out as she was pulled away, its tiny voice piercing the room like a siren of its own. Ethan staggered after them, soaked, trembling, his heart beating so hard it hurt. The hallway lights flickered as they rushed through, the echo of footsteps and distant thunder merging into one desperate symphony. He stopped at the entrance to the surgery room, the door closing between them. For a moment, he stood frozen, the rain dripping from his hair, his hands empty for the first time all night. The sirens outside began to fade. The world seemed to hold its breath. And in that stillness, the only sound left was the soft, broken cry of the puppy at his feet, waiting, watching, refusing to leave the door. Ethan knelt beside it, his throat tightening. He placed a hand gently over its trembling back and whispered, "You did good, little one. You brought her home." Behind the door, faint voices called out commands. Machines beeped. Life fought against time. And as the storm raged outside, Ethan bowed his head and prayed, not with words, but with everything he had left to give. The clinic waiting room was silent, too silent. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, humming like tired thoughts that wouldn't rest. The white walls gleamed sterile, unfeeling. Somewhere behind them, machines beeped in uneven rhythm, marking the fragile border between life and loss. Ethan sat hunched on one of the hard plastic chairs, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight enough to whiten his knuckles. His patrol jacket hung soaked and heavy around his shoulders, dripping onto the linoleum floor. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, sharp and cold. At his boots sat the puppy. It was trembling, little body quivering with exhaustion and fear. Its fur was still damp, its paws muddy, but its eyes, those dark, pleading eyes, stayed locked on the hallway where the mother had been taken. Every few minutes it let out a soft whimper, so small it barely broke the stillness, and pressed its head against Ethan's boot like it was the only thing anchoring it to safety. Ethan reached down, absently, fingers brushing the puppy's ears. "She's in there, little one. he murmured. His voice was hoarse, worn thin. "They'll take care of her. We did everything we could." But even as he said it, the words rang hollow. He'd said those same words once before, years ago. He could still see the flashing red lights, the smoke curling into a midnight sky, the wreckage of a collapsed warehouse where his old K9 partner, Ranger, had gone in after a suspect. He'd heard the groan of the structure, the radio calls, the distant bark that cut off too soon. He'd run until his lungs bled, clawed through debris until his hands were raw. But when they finally pulled Ranger out, the dog's body had already gone still. That night, he'd stood in the same kind of sterile room, with the same antiseptic air, holding a leash that led nowhere. He'd told himself he'd made peace with it, that it was part of the job. But sitting here now, listening to the faint hum of machines behind the walls, he realized he'd only buried the grief, deep enough to forget, but never deep enough to heal. His fingers tightened on his knees. The puppy shifted closer, curling against his boot, seeking warmth that he barely had to give. Ethan bowed his head, voice breaking into a whisper. "I couldn't save him." The puppy stirred, its small head tilting up as if listening. "But maybe," he said, his voice barely audible, "maybe I can save her." The words hung in the still air like a vow. He didn't know how long he sat there. Minutes, hours, maybe longer. The clock on the far wall ticked faintly, each second stretching into forever. Occasionally, footsteps echoed down the hallway, the shuffle of nurses, the distant clang of metal trays, but none came toward him. The pup's eyes began to droop, its body curling tighter. Ethan reached down, resting a hand lightly on its back. The tiny rise and fall of its breathing steadied his own. For a moment, he let himself close his eyes. The weight of the night caught up with him. The run through the woods, the rain, the struggle, the blood. Behind his lids, flashes played like ghosts, her frail body under the branch, the light fading from her eyes, the desperate cry of this small creature beside him. When the sound of footsteps finally stopped in front of him, he opened his eyes slowly. A man in scrubs stood there, the vet from earlier. His face was unreadable. Ethan shot to his feet. "How is she?" he asked, voice cracking from dryness. The vet's gaze softened. "You brought her just in time." For a moment, Ethan didn't move. The words hit him like a jolt of electricity. Just in time. His knees almost gave out. He exhaled shakily, pressing a hand over his face as a sound escaped him. Half laugh, half sob. The puppy perked up, tail twitching once before it let out a small bark, as if it understood. "She's not out of danger," the vet added gently. "But she's stable. She'll need rest, fluids, and time. She's strong, stronger than she looks." Ethan nodded, trying to speak, but no words came. He swallowed hard, managing a broken, "Thank you." The vet gave a kind smile. "You should get some rest too, deputy." Then he turned and disappeared down the hall again, leaving Ethan and the pup in the soft hum of silence. Ethan sat back down, his body trembling now that the adrenaline had drained from him. The puppy crawled into his lap uninvited, curling into a tight ball. He let it. For the first time that night, the silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt earned. Days passed in a blur of early mornings and long nights. Ethan came back to the clinic every day, his uniform wrinkled, his eyes tired. The nurses began to recognize him, greeting him with soft smiles and quiet nods. He always brought something: a towel, a blanket, sometimes a coffee for the staff, though he never stayed far from the recovery room. Inside, the mother dog lay swaddled in warm blankets. IV tubes ran along her paw, her breathing slow but steady. The puppy never left her side, pressed against her chest, as if trying to breathe for her. Every time Ethan visited, he crouched beside the bed and laid a hand on her side. "You're doing good, girl," he whispered. "Keep fighting." Sometimes, when no one was watching, his voice softened. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for him, but I'm here for you." The nurses said his voice helped, so he kept talking about the quiet town outside, the stars over the ridge that once guided him home, about Ranger, the one he couldn't save. Day by day, she grew stronger. Her breathing steadied, her ribs no longer showed. Color returned to her coat. But the moment that broke him came one late afternoon, sunlight slanting through the blinds. The puppy lay asleep across his lap when he felt it, a twitch beneath his hand. Her paw moved, her eyes fluttered open, disoriented at first, then finding him. Recognition flickered, soft, weary, real. Ethan froze. Then he broke. Tears blurred everything as he gripped her paw. "Welcome back, Mama," he whispered. Her tail gave the smallest twitch. The puppy stirred, nestling against her side. Ethan bowed his head to her paw, tears soaking the blanket. For the first time in years, he wasn't mourning the dead. He was holding the living. Weeks passed. Winter softened into spring. The clinic filled with sunlight and the scent of fur and soap instead of antiseptic. The mother shepherd, coat sleek again, lay peacefully near the window. The puppy darted through the light, clumsy and wild, always returning to nuzzle her mother's face. Each time she answered with a gentle lick, patient, calm, endless love. Ethan leaned in the doorway, coffee in hand, watching them. The hum of that little room felt like something holy. Nurses passing by smiled. "They're not patients anymore," one whispered. "They're family." Somewhere, between long nights and quiet mornings, Ethan's walls had begun to crumble. The silence he once wore like armor had been replaced by soft barks, wagging tails, and the rhythm of another heartbeat. The clinic, once a cage of grief, had become a sanctuary. But they couldn't stay forever. When the vet entered, Ethan was scratching behind the mother's ear. "She's doing remarkably well," the vet said. "Strong appetite, steady weight, good spirit." Ethan smiled. "She's tougher than both of us." The vet nodded, then set a folder on the counter. "There's one more thing. Adoption forms." For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. His gaze drifted to the dogs, the pup rolling on its back, the mother's eyes calm and full of trust. "You sure I'm the right one?" he asked. "Deputy," the vet said with a grin. "They decided that weeks ago. I'm just here to make it official." Ethan laughed softly, a sound edged with disbelief. "Guess I don't have much of a choice then." He signed his name, Ethan Cole, letters suddenly heavy with meaning. The vet closed the folder. "Congratulations. Looks like you've got yourself a family." Ethan blinked hard, smiling through tears. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Looks like I do." The mother lifted her head at his voice, eyes bright. The puppy wagged furiously. Ethan knelt beside them, running a hand through her fur. "You ready to go home, Mama?" Her tail thumped once. By the time they stepped outside, the sun was setting. The world glowed gold, the hour when everything seemed touched by grace. Ethan walked slowly, one hand holding the mother's leash, while the puppy bounded ahead, tripping over its own joy. The road stretched wide and open. Trees shimmered under the fading light, whispering in the wind. The mother walked close to his leg, steady, proud. The puppy chased shadows and imaginary butterflies. Ethan smiled, eyes wet but soft. He'd walked these streets 100 times alone. But not tonight. Tonight, every step carried the sound of paws against gravel, the rhythm of two hearts that had chosen him as much as he'd chosen them. At the truck, he paused. The sunset framed them, the mother tall and graceful, the pup's shadow dancing beside her. He whispered, "Sometimes the smallest cries lead us to the biggest miracles." The words drifted into the cooling air like a prayer. He no longer searched the sky for answers. They were right here, breathing beside him. Later that night, the porch lights cast a warm amber glow over the old wooden steps. The house, once hollow, felt alive again. The mother curled beside his chair, her head resting on her paws. The puppy sprawled across her back, asleep, their breaths rising and falling together. Ethan leaned back, one hand around a cold mug of coffee, the other resting on her head. The air, sir, was calm, filled with crickets and wind in the grass. For the first time in years, his chest didn't ache. The guilt, the loneliness, the ghosts had quieted. The puppy twitched in its dreams. The mother stirred, half awake, as if checking he was still there. "I'm not going anywhere," he murmured. The horizon still glowed faintly. Ethan looked toward it, voice barely above a whisper. "You did it, girl. You saved her. You saved me." Her tail thumped softly. Ethan exhaled, the deep breath of a man finally letting go. And as night settled around them, the three sat together, man, mother, and pup, bathed in the soft golden afterglow of a world made new. What began as rescue had become salvation, not just for them, but for him. Sometimes, life has a way of reminding us that love doesn't always speak in words sometimes. It barks, it waits, and it forgives. German shepherds have always had that gift. Loyalty that asks for nothing, courage that never falters, and hearts that somehow heal the people who rescue them. Ethan thought he was saving two strays that night, but in truth, they were saving him. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt that quiet understanding, that bond that needs no language, you already know what this story is about. It's about trust, second chances, and the kind of love that only grows stronger with time. And if stories like this touch something in you, maybe take a little time to learn more about your own dog, what they feel, what they need, and how deeply they love you back. There's a wonderful place I found that helps people do just that. I'll leave it for you to explore when you're ready. Because in the end, every wag, every bark, every quiet moment beside them, that's the miracle we're all given. Cherish it.